Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the SoftCo webinar. We can see there are still a number of folks still trickling and joining us. So we're just going to pause for another few seconds to a minute and we'll kick off momentarily. So if you please bear with us, we'd really appreciate it. Okay, I've got us at 1 minute past the hour, so we'll kick things off. Good morning or good afternoon, folks, depending on where you're dialing in. As I said, you're all very welcome to the SoftCo webinar, and thank you very much for joining us here today. What we're ultimately going to be discussing, as you can see on screen, is AP analytics. So how to spot the cost, risk, and bottlenecks hidden across the AP process. Today's session isn't just about AP analytics itself, but more so the sense of kind of where AP teams are stemming from. Most AP teams that we're speaking to already have some sort of reports in place. Some of them might be quite manual. Some perhaps are utilizing different systems and applications. But the biggest challenge that Garret and I see is that many reports only show what happened after the fact. So a lot of teams are still being quite reactive as opposed to being proactive throughout their AP process. So by that stage, invoices may have already been delayed. Suppliers may already be chasing the status of invoices or the subsequent payment of invoices. Exceptions are starting to mount up. Challenges and bottlenecks are starting to mount up. And finance teams are kind of chasing their tail, trying to understand and explain exactly what happened and keep their head above water to pay key vendors and suppliers on time. So ultimately, what we want to do as part of today's webinar is explore how AP analytics can help and assist teams and be able to spot those issues earlier in the process. We're going to focus, as I said, on three key areas today. So the hidden cost, the hidden risk, and the hidden bottlenecks associated with the process. And the aim of it is really to show how you can move from being that reactive as opposed to being more proactive across your AP process. Just to introduce myself, my name is Adam McDonagh. I am one of the AP and P2P consultants here for SoftCo, having been with the organization for over 11 years. And I'm also delighted to be joined by my very esteemed colleague, Garret Pearse. Garret leads our overall pre-sales function here for SoftCo. Garret, thank you very much for joining us. You're very welcome.
Always a pleasure. Adam, thanks for having me join today.
I appreciate it and looking forward to hopefully a productive conversation. So just looking at the agenda slide here, folks, this is ultimately what we're going to cover. So we'll start at looking why AP issues often stay hidden. So even when teams already have existing reporting applications in place, we'll then look at kind of the main three areas where AP should be focusing. So where hidden cost builds, where hidden risk builds, and where the bottlenecks slow the overall invoice lifecycle. We'll focus on the three most important questions that AP teams should be asking themselves. And finally, then we'll wrap up with some key takeaways. And also, I think we might jump into the application as well, just to give you a sense of the overall reporting capabilities that we have at our disposal to arm yourself with information as you start to navigate your overall analytics and reporting journey. And one thing just to point out, folks, we do want this to be as interactive as possible. So there is a questions tab, which is available to you when you logged into today's webinar. So if you have any burning questions, any comments, any feedback, be sure to submit those questions directly to us. And Garret and I will certainly answer those as part of the course of today's webinar.
Great. Just while we're getting into the meat of the talk today, I'm just launching a poll there, Adam, just to understand maybe for attendees where they're at in the AP automation journey, because that will obviously dictate what level of AP analytics they're able to obtain or access or aspire to. So if you could take a moment to just answer the poll that will have popped up in your webinar control tab, that would be much appreciated. So I'll just leave that there for a moment or two, but we can carry on while that poll is sitting there. It's just sitting there in the control tab.
Yeah, and we can maybe look at some of the results as well. So I suppose, Garret, first and foremost, I'm conscious that there's probably organizations joining today's webinar that maybe are in different stages of their journey, right? So we possibly have some organizations that still are completely manual across their AP process. So maybe they're still printing invoices off, saving invoices down, using Excel or something similar to track status and reports and insights of invoices. Others may be semi-automated, and what I mean by that, maybe using different systems and applications to drive an element of automation across their AP process and function, and those systems may come with some out-of-the-box reporting capabilities, which ultimately still may be quite limited. And again, organizations perhaps might have an incumbent AP solution that, again, isn't delivering on kind of modern AP reports and insights that organizations are looking to get a glimpse into. So when we look at those kind of broad strokes, what are the typical issues that you see based on your conversations data with AP teams that still often stay hidden and are still problematic for finance teams?
Yeah, I'll actually just kind of talking to some. I'm not going to go through all the items here. Maybe just talk to some of them. First of all, if you're coming from a manual background, that can be a real struggle. You're having to manually capture information, so that can be a real blind spot. So we haven't called that out here, but it's kind of implied in what we're talking about, that if you haven't got any kind of AP automation system, you're maybe just working off emails and things, it's very hard to gain visibility, and as a result to be able to identify trends or bottlenecks, etc. If you do have something like even a workbench in an ERP, they tend to be more limited in terms of how they can be made visible, how they can be assigned, how they can be escalated, etc. Within those, there may be holes and things that the ERP is assigning, but again, they're not easily surfaced from an overall analysis point of view. Off the back of that, then you're slowing down your whole approvals or matching process, and that all will often come to a head in terms of where stuff doesn't get processed in time, so your manual work is going into bigger and bigger backlog, and can come to a head at key reporting times like month end, where you're scrambling to get all of the data, see what's in train, what's delayed, what's got issues that haven't yet been resolved. So it's having all of those things in flow, but you don't have any visibility of it. And another complicating factor I've seen is often invoices, for example, that are coming through different channels have different visibility as well. So you may have some EDI invoices coming into your system that you're using, some exception reports when you try and load them into your ERP. You have your non-PO that you're going through your email. You have your regular PDF coming in via email that you're trying to manually capture and match into the system and escalate through email as well. So all of these different contributing factors mean that you're not really able to get a grip to what the specific issues are at any one time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the ERP systems, Garret, in particular, are quite limited. They're not built, obviously, with AP automation in mind, and therefore some of the reports and analytics, once that data is presented in the ERP system, is still not giving AP and finance enough information and that they need. So that's another kind of typical barrier and challenge that we see.
Absolutely. And then I suppose that kind of brings us on to the next point there, which I think probably skip on, but kind of talk more about then the effect that has on the AP process and the AP team.
Yeah. And one of the challenges, Garret, that we see there is obviously AP teams fundamentally right now are just so busy, right? We know there's growing demands on the AP teams. You've referenced the different maybe methods and formats of invoices coming into the business. So, mix of email, PDF, EDI, the ever-growing landscape and changing landscape of e-invoicing, right? So they're having to monitor those elements and different strands and formats of invoices. But also businesses are growing, right? So volume is increasing month on month, year on year for AP teams. It's incredibly difficult to hire people. We know, it is an employee market. Talent is rife, but again, trying to attract that talent into your AP process, it's time consuming, it's costly, and particularly when you're trying to attract someone into a manual process, that's even more difficult. So really what we see is AP teams are trying to keep their head above water, if you like. It's trying to stay afloat, ensure that they're able to pay invoices on time, that they actually don't have time even to digest what's happening, take a step back and kind of troubleshoot and make corrections internally. And that leads to, senior finance leaders, CFOs, senior executives kind of questioning what's happening. So why is it taking so much time? Why are we not paying our vendors on time? And AP are often unfairly having the finger pointed at them as well as part of that process. So
yeah, I think they're often struggling just to keep their head above water, just getting through the next invoice and having to blindly slog invoice to invoice, often repeating the same inefficiencies without ever having the time to kind of get out of that cycle. And part of that is it's maybe invisible from somebody looking down as to what they're spending their time on. Why is it taking so long? Why are there delayed payments? Very often, AP are cleaning up the mess created by procurement, by the business, by stock management teams, etc. That if they're not doing their job, that all flows into AP, who are then struggling to keep on top of the invoice backlog. But without proper data to see what are the contributing factors, AP are kind of stuck in this constant cycle of doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I think that the next thing, Garret, and we've kind of alluded to this already, and touched on it, is teams, with that manual intervention and processes in place, again, with limited reports and insights, they still are being highly reactive. Again, if you don't have instant visibility of things happening as they're taking place, and if you don't have time to take a step back and understand and dissect what's happening, the risk there is a problem happens and you're unaware of the problem before you're not aware of the problem, sorry, I should have said, before it actually happens and transpires. So if we're to look at that in isolation, what are typically the issues and risks that AP teams are citing to you that they're experiencing on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think first of all, some of it is contributing to the workload that they're having to do things in a hurried fashion. And coming back to they're not able to really see what the particular issues, what are the recurring issues. Again, very often they'll know instinctively what the problems are, but they're not able to put a measure on it. They're not able to see, okay, well, it's actually the reason we're spending so much time on exception invoices is because it boils down to these 5 suppliers, which we're having to spend an inordinate amount of time having to fix the problems, which means that we're starting to fall behind on paying those invoices, and that in turn is also making us fall behind on processing other vendors' invoices, so that it's back into that spiral of trying to play catch up all the time and never being able to put your finger on the exact root causes. If you're able to understand that by fixing a problem in one area of the business or with one key supplier, that can start to release back some time that you can then go and use that time to do further investigations and reclaim. But you're working in that constant slog of just against the next invoice, as I said, and next thing you know, because you're caught up in that minute detail, next thing you know, suddenly you've missed payment on a number of invoices and you're suddenly cut off by a key supplier. Whereas if you had foresight of what was in train, what was falling due, etc., you'd have been able to preempt that and also take steps to improve the process underlying it as well.
Yeah, I think that the one other thing to add there from a risk standpoint, Garret, and everyone joining today's webinar is obviously very aware of it, is the ever-growing risk of fraudulent activity as well happening within the business. We know with advancements in AI in particular that...
Have we lost Adam? I think we seem to have lost Adam there, but yeah, I think what he was alluding to was the challenge with the fact that there's more and more fraud attempts, and if you're not able, again, if you're up against the pump trying to process invoices, you'll sometimes be more easily caught out by fraudulent attempts in terms of in the rush to process invoices, you won't be paying the same level of attention, etc. So that can be a real challenge there. So that's another thing on top of what else AP are dealing with, just from sheer volume, multiple channels, manual delays, etc. So I think I'll be doing it on a one-handed basis. Oh, I got kicked out as well. No, I'm still here. So hopefully you can all see my screen. So really what we're trying to do is provide a mechanism through which AP are able to answer these questions. They can see where the invoices are stuck. They can see what's driving delays, and also see what should they be prioritizing first. Where are the key strategic areas that they need to address, either at the macro level on a supplier by supplier, buyer by buyer basis, but also operationally in terms of what specific invoices are maybe creating the most risk if they don't get processed in time. So we have Adam back.
Apologies, Garret. Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened there. I got booted out.
Yeah. I need to
Apologies, folks.
pay your phone bill again. So yeah, so we had gone on and we're just talking about trying to answer some of the key questions that AP have. So being able to see where the invoices are stuck, what's driving any delays, and being able to know what to prioritize based on having all of that information to hand.
Yeah, so it's those type of invoices, Garret. Is there an early payment discount available? Is there a key vendor and supplier that's going to give you access to, depending on your industry, access to raw materials, to production goods, etc. You want to make sure you're paying those on time and keeping those happy. Is there risk of late payment penalties, etc.? Can you mitigate those ahead of time and pay those earlier so you're not being penalized? So it's those type of invoices that you're able to get the insight into them first and foremost, and then take appropriate action from there.
So yeah, and I think that kind of leads into the 2B, where we would want you to be, which is being able to, kind of like you've been talking to there, early intervention, spotting those problems earlier, being able to see what needs to be prioritized, either from an AP point of view, from a supplier management and engagement point of view, and with your business teams that you're working with. What we also see is being able to manage workload better, being able to maybe distribute, be able to spot where maybe one particular work stream is maybe building up with stuff, and being able to see that needs to be, somebody needs help, rather than them kind of drowning in their own particular backlog of what they're being trying to look after. Stronger supplier conversations. Often it's very hard to go to a supplier who you're spending a lot of time processing their invoices because of the way they're maybe misquoting, mispricing the invoices, not delivering on time. If you don't have specific data to be able to say 60% of your invoices are causing processing issues because of how you're presenting the invoice data, it's much better to be able to give that information and say that's why you're getting paid late. If you can fix X, Y, or Z of what's on your invoice, we'll be able to pay you more efficiently, be able to either pay you early and get early discounts, or at least be able to make sure that our account is always within credit limits, etc. And automation insights, that's a combination of being able to see maybe where supplier issues are slowing you down, also internal process issues are slowing you down in terms of buying habits, receiving habits, general user interactions, seeing where particular people are a barrier to AP being able to get the job done. And then also start to see the trends and be able to even forecast the trends that may be based on growing volume and growing workload. If we have automation in place, do we have enough resources based on future trends? Is it going to be able to help us be able to process maybe a growing invoice volume as our business hopefully grows? Okay, before we kind of go to the key takeaways, I thought, Adam, what I might do at this stage is to kind of jump into some real life examples of what we've done in SoftCo in terms of trying to provide some of the visibility we talked about. So if that's okay, I might just jump in.
I think it'd be a good opportunity, Garret, just to give people a sense of the type of reports and analytics that they should be thinking about and perhaps are available to them within an automated platform.
Okay, so just from an overall visibility point of view, so I've just jumped into the SoftCo AI Plus platform. What we can see is just loading up there. First of all, just general visibility. What's the state of play? How many invoices are in process? Where they are throughout the process? Who they are with? So what's just come into your inbox, maybe as a PDF? What's awaiting matching? What's with the AP team, etc. And that's kind of your macro level view of where things are in the process. But obviously what's, for example, a more important driver is how does that relate to what's overdue, what's due today, etc. So you can have that view as to what invoices maybe are having problems, maybe due, maybe often not necessarily down to AP's fault or even the company's fault, but being able to see what's in backlog, what's behind due to whatever reason, and be able to drill down and see what those are. Also, from a foresight point of view, being able to see, if I click into this financial dashboard here, is being able to see what is the payment profile for the invoices that are in place. So if we're paying, for example, multi-currency, I can see on a currency by currency basis how any invoices are outstanding, when they fall due. So this can often be a blind spot for treasury departments as to when they're going to need to have certain funds in place to allow payments of invoices. We can provide that type of information. And that's all grounded by having a good AP automation process in place to gather this data, obviously, as well. And then you can see profiled by your particular suppliers as to what your exposure with active invoices is on a supplier by supplier basis, so you can make sure that strategic suppliers are being paid on time, that you're not in danger of being put on hold by a key supplier because you fail to pay an invoice on time. Those are very much kind of moment in time. What we also want to be able to do is then look back to look forward, if you like. So be able to see where on a KPI basis have we been performing well, and more importantly, where have we not been performing well. So for example, if I look at for some performance analysis, we can see trends in terms of maybe invoice volume growth month on month. That can be a useful indicator. But also, if we look at things like where you really want to get into the weeds, is where is stuff taking time. So for example, if we look at this stage share of processing time, we're able to see where our invoice is taking the most time, and we need to make sure that whoever is monitoring or actioning, whether it's the AI platform or whether it's business users, are actioning things, that we have sufficient resources to help get that volume through of invoices. And also then being able to generate some, as I was mentioning earlier on, being able to go and have meaningful conversations with suppliers. And that's where we come at it from our point of view, with the concept of a supplier scorecard, that we can, on a supplier by supplier basis, identify how much time we're having to spend on their invoices, what's the typical exception rate, what's the typical amount of steps it's taking to process those invoices, what's the time we require for each of those invoices. So that can, first of all, lead us to which suppliers, for example, are taking up most of our time. You may have a sense of that, but if we can give you some specific data that we can see which suppliers take up most of our time, which suppliers are also having the most exceptions, that can lead you to making process improvements and nipping stuff in the bud in terms of your supplier relationships. If we look at it from the other angle, maybe from a more internal point of view, we can see which particular users are having to spend time on invoices. That can be a combination of AP users and finance users, being able to see who are the particular users that are holding up processing of invoices, etc. That if we can give you performance reporting around who takes the longest, for example, to respond to invoices, that can be very important data too. And ultimately start to get into managing the overall automation metrics, for example, is what's the particular rate of straight through processing, what percentage of invoices through AP automation are we able to automate, process through touchlessly, and make sure that we're maintaining that at either a stable or increasing level based on feeding back on the data that we can see where there's something stopping straight through processing. If we can fix that, that's going to lead to an upward trend in that STP rate month on month as well. So I'm not going to spend more time just going into this. I think what would be useful, maybe from your point of view, we'd be happy to jump on a call with you and walk you through it in the context of your own particular challenges, if your organization is interested in exploring that further. But just wanted to kind of give some concrete examples of some of the reporting data that is available. One final thing just before I leave that is being able to ask it questions. So what we've built into our solution is the ability to, for example, ask it natural language questions and be able to get responses back from the system. So you can see You can ask it rather than having a pre-existing report. You can literally just ask it a natural language question, and it will come back with a particular response and report for you. So that can really enhance your ability to work with the system and get the information that will help make you as a department, as a function, better and better at what you do.
And Garret, that ultimately allows AP teams then to create their own set of custom reports as well, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, because every finance manager, every finance controller dreads the CFO coming in with them saying, can you get me report on X, Y, or Z? And if they can't, if they're scrambling to pull all the kind of stuff into Excel, whereas if you can go in and just ask a question and get the data you need, that makes your job much more easy.
Yeah, perfect. Just a few key takeaways then, folks, before we turn over to Q&A, and do be sure to submit those questions through to us, but we'll certainly allow for some time to answer those on today's session. I think, Garret, fundamentally, the challenge stems from AP and finance teams not having access to reports and insights. So again, through the manual processes that we've spoken about, AP teams are not becoming aware of the problems or issues until after they arise, right? So everything is still being quite reactive as opposed to being proactive across the board. The hidden costs that we've talked about again throughout today's webinar really stem from the manual workload, the reliance on increased FTEs and resources across the business, slow cycle times, delayed payments, payment penalties, missed discounts, etc. Some of the hidden risks then, obviously through aging of invoices, the approval delays, which again is a common challenge for AP, right? Is once the invoice leaves the AP team and goes out to the business users, they're somewhat powerless. They're having to chase approval and status of approvers across the board as well. So spending a lot of time actually chasing the overall approval process. That stems directly then into some supplier issues. So strained relationships with vendors and suppliers. Again, back to the point around missed discounts, late payment penalties as well. And obviously the risk then with that manual processes of kind of fraudulent activity happening and occurring across the business. I think that the key thing to point out is all of this, what fundamentally underpins this is an AP automation tool and vehicle, right? So it's about ensuring that you can drive as much automation across your AP process and environment as you possibly can achieve. That goes back to one of the key messages that we mentioned earlier. That will surface everything to you. So with a best in breed or best of class AP solution, you will have access to those reports and insights. But more importantly, you'll have time back to actually assess those reports and insights, go into them, see what's happening, see what's working, which is great. It's good to see that, obviously. But more importantly, where are you still having challenges? Where are bottlenecks still occurring? Where are delays still happening? And being able to give it a kind of a single point source, right? So is it a problematic vendor, for example? Is it a problematic user in terms of creating the purchase order? Is there a problematic approver in the business that's always causing you delays, or perhaps a department that's always causing you delays? AP at the moment in a manual world might be able to, guess that or have a good sense of it, but it's critical that you've obviously got data backing that you can stand over is accurate. And from there, then ensuring that you've got everything in one single application. So things like your accruals reports, your accruals positions, they're all accurate, they're updated. That stems directly then into more streamlined month-end closes, audit periods, etc. So I think fundamentally, Garret, it starts with an AP automation application that gives you obviously time and cost savings, but also gives you the reports and insights that you're looking to glean. And from there, then you have the time to take appropriate action as well.
Exactly. So hopefully that's given everybody some insight. Just while we were talking there, I just launched another poll in the window there just to understand really what you would be looking for as an organization for better reporting, what would be the key priorities there. So if you could take a moment to answer that, we'd greatly appreciate that.
Just while we're doing that, Garret, there is a few questions that have come through. I'm just looking at the questions tab here. If you don't mind, I might throw some at you. So the first one is, if analytics show several issues at once, how should an AP team decide what to prioritize first?
Well, I think it's I would always say it's whatever's going to has the biggest impact or cost on the business. So if it's you're trying to prioritize between obviously the value of the invoice, importance of the supplier in terms of a strategic point of view, the due date, etc., will play a big factor. But if you can get data that's able to help identify at an aggregate level and at an individual level. What are those invoices? Why are they being held up? And what's the impact of being able to resolve those in terms of paying on time and the value thereof? I think if you can, for example, be able to run a report that sorts based on those kind of parameters, that can lead you to what you need to prioritize.
Okay, great. There's another good question here, Garret, which kind of stems back to our point around AP automation. So how can AP analytics help teams understand whether automation is actually working?
Yeah, I think it's first thing I'd always say is if you're implementing AP automation, before you implement anything, is benchmark what you're doing in your manual world at the moment. So it can be a bit of a job, a bit of a task to do it, but it's time worth spending to see how long are invoices taking to process at the moment in terms of end to end, the amount of time spent, the amount paid on time, the amount paid late. If you have some of those benchmarks, that then means that when you start to report on that, having an AP automation solution to help you get more efficient and able to report on that, you can compare it to where you started from, where you're getting to month on month. And then on a month by month basis, you're constantly going in and comparing those KPIs to see, are we getting better? Is our straight through process improving? Is our payment on time improving? That being able to look and compare different quarters, different months to see where the improvements are taking place, if there's any backstepping in terms of downgrading and improvement, be able to spot that and be able to then drill through and see what's led to those issues arising.
Super. And there's one final question, Garret, that I can see. It's related to actually using other BI tools. So a couple of questions coming in around, being able to integrate with the likes of Power BI or Tableau or Snowflake. So does the application have the
Yeah,
ability to pass the data out to those applications?
yeah, important question. Yeah, because we present within our solution the data that we have access to, and we've got a huge, vast data lake of information. But it can be very useful for companies who use a Power BI to generate company-wide, cross-functional, cross-system reports. You can plug in the way our system is designed. It's got a standard connector for the likes of all of the BI tools like Power BI that they can just plug into the data we use, consume that data, merge it maybe with data from other systems like operational systems or stock systems, etc. So yeah, short answer, you can just plug in and use the same data that we use for our reports.
Great. I think that is all the questions that have come through. As Garret mentioned, folks, we will follow up with each and every one of you individually. So if you would like to take a deeper dive or to work with SoftCo to assess where you are in your AP automation journey, happy to obviously look at some benchmarking reports, do out your as-is process that Garret mentioned there. So really documenting kind of the moving parts of your AP process, which will allow you to turn your attention and to see if there's any value and benefit in terms of looking at AP automation. So we will follow up with each and every one of you individually. As always, thank you very much for tuning in. We do really appreciate it, and we hope to see you all very soon. Thanks, Garret. Appreciate you joining me here today.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Take care
Thanks,
now.
folks. Take care. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.